Good evening and welcome to another happy edition of All for United. I guarantee you it will be a happy edition. We'll try. On the eve of what feels like a really important game against Newcastle at Old Trafford tomorrow. And we've got two top fellas to discuss it with us. Daz, how are we doing?
I'm good. Starting to feel loads better. I've not been well, as you know, over the last few weeks. Man United's performances have not helped me. Maybe if we'd have won, I might have been feeling a bit better naturally. But yeah, I'm feeling good today. Feeling good.
Good. Ben, lovely to have you back with us. How are you doing, buddy?
Good, yeah. Enjoying Christmas apart from all the shenanigans at United.
Yeah, as long as you ignore United, it's great, isn't it, Christmas? Quality. So we're going to preview the Newcastle game, but we can't not talk about the Wolves game. So we'll kind of delve into it. What did you make of the performance, just as a whole, Daz? What did you make of the Wolves' performance?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I think for me it was the worst performance of the season. And I think it was. I mean, we were speaking about it, weren't we, at half time, saying how boring and how hard the first half was to watch. And that team on paper is not that bad. It isn't. These players are not that bad. And clearly the manager's not that bad. Something's just not working. I don't know. I mean, you mentioned some of the players backing Marcus Rashford in this. Marcus Rashford, Amarim Rawa, and this could be the last of the sort of tug of war between manager and player. And this is the reason Rashford needs to go. I don't know, but I didn't think there was anything in that performance that tells me we can remotely turn this around.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to disagree with you. As much as I'd love to, it's really hard. So a couple of talking points in the game, Ben. The Bruno sending off. Fair, did you think?
Probably on the balance of things, yeah. I think it wasn't ideal from Delo, was it, who gave him one of the passes, but ultimately he's turned into kind of, we knew he was kind of petulant in certain areas, but it never really carried over to getting red or yellow cards. But now it seems to be, it almost looks like he loses the instinct to play and then just goes and does stupid stuff like that, which he's got the captain's armband for a reason now. He's the one that shouldn't be doing that. So I think on the balance of things, yeah, fair, but not good from him. And it hasn't been good all season, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you expect more from your captain, don't you? I mean, I've seen a few people in the media, namely Keno. I've seen him mention it, Daz, that you'd strip Bruno of the captaincy, not because of the sending off, but just a little bit kind of like Ben says, he's just not captain material, is he? I think you need to be a certain character to be captain for a club like Man United. You need to put yourself out there in a certain way, I think. And where do you stand on this thing of Bruno being captain? Do you see him being captain long term? I mean, I agree with Ben. I mean, you've just got to be better than that, being the captain. As JJ says in the comments, 2 minutes into the second half, you have to control the moment better. You have to have more about you than being. Do you know what I mean? Than giving the ref no other option than to send you off, really.
Yeah, I think captains are going to get sent off from time to time. Sometimes it's just unfortunate. But like you said, he needed to be more disciplined in himself so early in the second half as well. I mean, it was like a Manchester derby and it was getting a bit heated, something like that. You can sort of forgive it because you can sort of call it passion, can't you?
Yeah.
But for me, it was just stupidity. I think the problem we've got with this captaincy with Bruno is if we let Bruno leave the club, we're losing, I believe, the last of the raw quality that we have at the club. The problem is he's not a captain. He's not captain material. Problem is, I don't think Man United would get away with stripping him of the captaincy and keeping him in that team. I think you'd completely lose him. I think he's quite a mardy football player, which is just one of the reasons why I don't think makes him a good captain. Problem is, I think he'll be the sort of player that would just go mardy if we stripped him of the captaincy, and that quality that we think we've got, we just won't have anymore, or it'll be a bit like what we're seeing with Rashford now. So it's an awkward one. You either keep the quality that you know he's got and accept the fact that we've not got a very good captain, which is massive in the Premier League, or we accept the fact that we've got to lose that quality, but we are going to bring in a new captain, which ultimately leads to a second problem. Who do you give the armband to? I think for me, it's a tough one. For me, although he wasn't a good, although his performances didn't justify the captain armband, I thought Harry Maguire had more qualities as a captain than Bruno does, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I just think that the captaincy was given to our best player and not necessarily the right player.
Yeah.
Problem is the captains you've got in the team, you wouldn't expect to be starting. You know, Johnny Evans, I think, would make a cracking captain for Man United, but he should be nowhere near that starting lineup and very rarely coming off the bench, given the players we've got. Problem is, you can't go to the market to bring in a new captain, not at a club like Man United. You know, the armband's got to be earned. So maybe, given Bruno's age, it could just be that sacrifice that we're going to sacrifice the fact that we're just not going to have a great captain for a few years to keep Bruno. And then in maybe 2-3 seasons' time, it could very much be the case of somebody stepped up into that captain material. Given his age, we're happy to see Bruno move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, we don't have millions of captains to choose from, do we? I mean, I think Maguire, I think it weighed him down a little bit, and I think he has performed a lot better since he's had it taken off him.
100%.
Yeah. Do you have a talking point from the game, Ben? I mean, like I say, we won't go into it too much, but there's a couple of bits. Onana getting beat from a blooming corner. Like, talk to me about what the hell's going on.
We've said it. We were talking about it a couple of weeks ago. We just cannot, for the life of us, deal with these set pieces, and it seems to be now that Onana can't even get off his line. I saw people the day after saying that Wolves had impeded him, and he looked like he'd been sandwiched in a little bit and stuff like that. But ultimately, would Schmeichel have got stuck in that situation? No, he'd have just elbowed whatever you have to do to get out of that. And ultimately, Onana's not a small keeper. He's a big presence. He's quite a muscular fella. He can come out and get the ball. It just seems like he doesn't want to do it. And for it to be just floating in like that, like twice in... When was the last time we conceded direct from a corner? I don't even know off the top of my head. And then to have it twice in like almost the space of a week is just crazy. The set pieces need sorting out, because it feels every time it's like near enough a penalty or a direct free kick. That's how bad we are from set pieces.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it feels like teams are targeting that now. Like they're bending the ball in underneath the keeper, and I think the modern day goalkeeper, I think they almost kind of hinge on that thing that they get everything in the box. Bayindir did it against Spurs. He weren't really touched, but he was hoping that was going to be a free kick. And I think Onana did the same again. As you say, Schmeichel would have just cleared everything out and just took that. They're far too weak for me now. I think a few people in the comments have said it in past shows. Excuse me, but they're far too weak nowadays, keepers. But yeah, Wolves did us, and they did us quite comfortably. I think they were worthy of the 3 points in the end. So on to Newcastle, Daz. Newcastle are starting to pick up a bit of form. In their last 4 games, they've scored 14 goals. In United's last 4, we've conceded 10. So let's start with you trying to convince me that United are getting a positive result tomorrow against Newcastle.
I think we've got a couple of players back. I could be wrong on that, but I think we've got Matthijs de Ligt back, which will be a massive contribution to that defence. We've definitely missed Matthijs de Ligt in there. I want to see the manager switch the goalkeepers for the game. He talks about, when he discusses Marcus Rashford, about how Marcus Rashford's got to earn his place in that team. So my first question would be, justify Onana starting another game. based on the last 3-4 games that we've seen, especially from set pieces, because there's a shout that he's to blame for all of them. You know, granted, there's been 2 set piece goals from corners where he was sort of infringed, but he's a big, strong guy, and there's nothing stopping him saying to Lenny Euro or Maguire, "Give me an hand, get me out of this, get me out of the sandwich," and one of them come in and just split it up. We see it all the time. That's got to be the goalkeeper. So I want to see the manager not just victimise Marcus Rashford in this or Garnacho. I want him to say, "I'm starting." I'd even take Keaton. He's not a bad goalkeeper. He's a good steady Eddie. He'll put in a good solid performance. Won't be a worldy performance. You won't see him make outrageous saves, but I think he would calm the storm, and his experience would be so vital. So I'd like to see potentially Heaton start the game, just to put a message out there that these goalkeeping performances are not good enough. I think that would be good for United. I want, dare I say it, because I'd like to think Casemiro's going to come back into it. Not because I prefer him over Ugarte or Mainu, just because it's not quite working with Mainu and Ugarte together right now. It lacks a little bit of quality. It lacks a little bit of legs. I know you won't necessarily get the legs with Casemiro, but I'd like to think that the time that he's had on the bench would bring that experience back out on him. And he wants to win these games. The front 3 for me, I think, just need to gel now. Bruno, Ahmed, and Højlund. I think it's what we've got for the time being. We know we can't upgrade it. Mason Mount's not available. I just want to see them 3 play as many games as they can and just start to build some chemistry. And there is quality there. I mean, like I say, Bruno Fernandes on his days the most productive player in the Premier League.
He's out there.
Everybody right now is talking about Ahmed. I don't think there's a football team in the world that wouldn't take him. You know, I mean, I was seeing Arsenal fan TV the other day. They was talking about, let's go out and put a bid in for him because he's in the last 6 months of his contract. Let's bring him to Arsenal. You know, biggest worry Arsenal would have with Ahmed is I think he'd put Saka on the bench, and I don't think they'd like that.
He'd want his spot, wouldn't
he? When he's back. But no, I think we're due a win. We are due a win, and far from the Wolves game, I think that there's been some positives from, the previous games. I mean, Spurs, it was a 4-3 game. That could have gone either way for me. I think, we could have got a good result from that. We did beat Man City regardless to the issues, and it was a good performance. They turned up for the derby. So we know these players and can do this. The performances haven't been as bad as the results. I know in the last 2 games they've been absolutely atrocious, but in terms of the last 10 games under Ruben Amorim, the performances haven't been as bad as the results.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I think there has been elements of positivity, but tomorrow we're going to be missing Ugarte, missing Bruno Fernandes through suspension, so the midfield's going to look a bit iffy. How would you line it up, Ben, in the midfield and that front 3 without Bruno or Ugarte?
I think you go Casemiro. I don't know if Eriksen's fit or not, but I don't think he's suited for this game anyway, even if he was. And then I think in Bruno's position, I will go with Garnacho.
Yeah.
I think best option against Newcastle. I'm probably more worried about this game than I have been any of the other games in the last few weeks, just off the back of that Wolves performance, to be honest. I think we might get pegged back a little bit. I think their midfield will be comfortable. You think of Tonali, Bruno and Joe Linton, Willock, whoever it is, they've all got more legs than any of our midfield, which is the big worry for us. I think we might end up seeing our wing-backs getting pushed back and we end up sat in a 5 and just waiting for the counter-attack, which is why I'd put Garnacho in, because I don't think Xerxes got the legs to do that, really. It's worrying me, to be honest. The more it gets towards the game, I'm getting a little bit more nervous.
Yeah, I mean, options are quite thin on the ground, aren't they? The one thing that I would probably change from the Wolves game is not have Dalot and Mazraoui as the wing-backs. Have more attack-minded wing-backs, maybe Ahmad on the right, and maybe, as you say, bring Garner in, just to have a bit more of a threat going forward on the wings. It feels a bit too much like we're playing a 5 to me. when we have Dallo and Mazraoui, and it feels a little bit too negative. But like I say, I'd probably put Casemiro in the middle with Mainu as well, and then does he bring Collier in? Possibly not. But I think you're spot on though. I think you're spot on. The midfield will be where the game's won tomorrow, and I think Newcastle will just outpower us in that midfield. As JJ says, Ugarte is a much bigger miss than Bruno. I agree. I don't think Bruno plays the system particularly well, to be fair. And Ugarte, I think, has been really good, and he gives us the legs that you talk about. Does he gives us those legs? How would you line up the back, Ben? I'll come to you in a sec, Daz. How would you line up the back, Ben? The back three.
I'm hoping De Ligt's back, and then you put him in the middle, Yoro and Martinez either side, because I think ultimately Harry Maguire's performed well to a certain extent, which is good to see. But I think that's the best three, and probably the one that we want to be aiming to get towards for 30, 40 games a season next season. So I think just play him. And I think as well, Newcastle, they're going to, although they'll be able to keep hold of the ball, they will try and hit us on the break as well if they get the chance. So it's going to go into Isak, it's going to go into Gordon. And I think Yoro and Martinez are a little bit more comfortable dealing with that out wide than what Maguire will be.
Yeah, got a bit more pace to them, haven't they, to deal with it? Yeah, I think you're pretty close to the 11. I would say. If we lose this game, Daz, I don't like throwing out reactionary stuff. If we lose this game, does some of the blame have to start going on Amorim, or is it just the players? It feels like we're not getting enough from this group of players.
I'm not a big fan of constantly blaming the players. I mean, we saw this under Jose Mourinho, and we've recycled most of them players out the team now. We blamed, the Fred McTominay, the Varane, Maguire, Lindelof, Maguire. None of these are big players in this team anymore. Every single time we get a manager and he gets under pressure, there's this massive thing where people got players. It's the players. Players are not good enough. How many times do we need to circulate these players out before we realise it's not necessarily the players? Now, obviously, you can't put the manager to blame because this issue's been here all season. So, and he's trying in an unsuccessful way to work through what he believes are the problems at the club. Problem is, Ruben Amorim needs to be a manager that I think has to work with this group of players, because other than maybe a really lucky free agent or a decent swap deal with maybe a Marcus Rashford, I can't see us bringing anyone in that of any significance in January, given the way that we're penny pinching across every aspect of the football club. I think the days of having a 400, 500, 600 million summer is over. I don't think we're going to get that in the summer either, which means that, he's got to work with this group of players. And I think as much as I want to see Ruben Amorim be given 2-3 seasons to turn this around, he isn't going to get that time. That is the one thing that we have found. But the problem, I think, that we've got, and we was talking about this, is yes, we can see a system starting to emerge, a certain style of play. I think we've seen that more in the Europa games where we've had the quality over teams, but we are starting to see the way that Ruben Amorim wants to play and the certain players that he wants to be versatile in different positions. Problem is, under Erik ten Hag, whether people like it or not, Onana was top of the clean sheet table. We was getting clean sheets and we was getting wins more than what Ruben Amorim is getting. Ruud van Nistelrooy taught us that these players can actually score goals. They just need a sense of freedom. They need a sense of that sort of positivity around the team. And Ruud taught us that. We're not getting any of that under Ruben Amorim. We're not getting clean sheets. We're not creating chances. That was another thing that Erik ten Hag was doing at the beginning of the season. We was creating as many chances as Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea. We're not even doing that now. And now I'm happy to see them things. We're starting to see a proper change in the team. But if we're being really honest with ourselves, other than being able to hold the ball and have more possession, we've seen a regression in every single element of the football club, and that can't happen under a new manager. He has to be able to work with what he's got short term, but also have that vision of what he needs that team to look like in 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons' time. Because you've only got to look at the past managers to see that time isn't something he's going to get. He's not going to get the time. Yeah. And I think there's been some mistakes that are already on his head, definitely. Yeah, it's a tough one because even in an okay game, Newcastle's in better form. Newcastle's higher in the table. You know what I mean? It's tough.
It's going to be a tough game. But let's stick to the game, Ben, and we'll come back to Ten Hag and Amorim and all that shortly. Where can we hurt Newcastle, Ben? Do you see Rashford coming back in as numbers are a little bit lower, or do you think Rashford's done with this one? But where can we hurt Newcastle?
I've done a preview already, and I don't think Rashford is going to be involved, to be honest. I think it feels like they're marginalising him just to... And I don't know if he'll come back into the squad. I don't know if he'll play again. If we get an offer in January, he might end up leaving. I think it would actually, weirdly enough, suit this game, which I think is why Garnacho needs to play. Like I say, if Newcastle manage to peg us back and they play the wingers high, I feel like Mazraoui and Dalot are going to play again, which, like we've already said, is a bit of an issue in terms of going forward. But it also means they're quite comfortable going back into fullback, and then you've got 5 at the back. So your only option there is to kind of play on that transition, which we've had some success with that in last few years or so, but it's not a consistent way of playing. At home to Newcastle, we should be going out there and playing the system that the manager wants, but we're just nowhere near that at the minute. I think that's what we need to rely on there tomorrow, is just transition and see where we get to. I do think their fullbacks, depending who plays, I think last week they played Livramento and that Hall at left back, which they like to go forward. They're better going forward than what they are going backwards. So I think if we do manage to get on the ball a little bit, it's getting in around them, really, not going into the centre halves, not trying to get it into Højlund, because he seems to be having a wrestling match with every centre half and not really coming out with the ball. We're better off going to the fullbacks and trying to create overloads out wide if we can.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I 100% agree with you about Rashford. I can't see him coming in, but I do think his pace. I do think against Fabian Schär, was it Dan Burn? Is it still with Newcastle? There's people to exploit there, I think. And as you say, Højlund's a little bit he's a little bit touch tight to the player, isn't he? Most of the time.
I think Burn played centre half as well for him last week.
Yeah.
Him and Gard, they're quite comfortable getting in a wrestling match, but they won't want to be running back towards the goal, which Højlund needs to be doing that. I don't know whether he will or not, but
I mean, he's got the pace as well, though, hasn't he, Højlund? Yeah, he has the pace for it to be put into space and for him to have a dart at it. He just very rarely does it. Okay, so let's talk predictions. Daz, give me your shining positive prediction for tomorrow's game.
Oh, you know what? I really want to. I really want to be positive and say something like 2-1 United, but I can see how, in my head, I can see how we're going to line up, and I can see we're going to struggle because Newcastle have got a bit of form, and I can see that Xerxes and Anthony are going to be the players that we're going to have to resort to bring it on, because I think Rashford's not going to be part of that. And I think it's really, really tough. I mean, if Rashford starts on the bench, which I don't think he will, I don't think he's going to be part of the matchday squad. But if maybe he takes a U-turn on this and thinks, I'm going to, he'll see the last 3 games and I'll think we've not won, I'm going to put Rashford on the bench and then resort to using him late in the game, I think we'll see something from Marcus Rashford, and I think we'll see a goal, and I think we'll see a great performance when he comes on. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be in that position to show us that. If Marcus Rashford's on the bench, I'm going to say 2-1 United. But if he isn't, I'm going to go for 1-0 Newcastle.
Okay. I mean, JJ said 2-1 in the comments as well. Dan, I think this is in the comments saying we've lost the game before it kicks off. Newcastle have desire that United don't have. Do you think that's fair, Ben?
Yeah, that's the one thing you could say Newcastle never lack, is desire and a bit of tenacity. So coming up against the current United, that's a bit of a worry, to be honest. And I think set pieces again is a big worry. You think, like you say, Dan Burn, Sharp,
yeah,
and they've got good delivery as well. So it's a worry. If
give
I
the
was
shit prediction, Ben.
I'd take a 1-1 draw and run. Honestly, I would.
See now, like you were saying earlier about we need to play on the transition. We need to kind of soak it up and maybe hit them on the break, for lack of a better word. Is that good enough for United to play that way, Ben? Like, or is that where we are? Do you know what I mean?
I think that's just where we're at. Ultimately, we haven't actually. There was a stat, wasn't there, that when Mazraoui and Deleuve played, we haven't actually created a goal from open play or something crazy like that.
Right? Wow.
Which isn't good. Obviously, when Amad Diallo's played there, he's created quite a bit from that position, and I think that's what Amorim wants to do. He wants us to be comfortable enough at the back so that we can play at least one winger, or like traditional winger, in that position. But number one, we don't have the midfield to do it. We don't have the defenders to kind of cover the spaces behind. So we just can't do it. And I think previously we've seen, even dating back to Ollie, we played on the transition quite a bit against some teams at home, and you're thinking we shouldn't be playing that. And ultimately we knew that. But Ollie was quite sensible in terms of thinking, we just don't have the players to do this. We're going to put Pogba there, and then we're just going to spray balls out to Rashford or who will not be named on the other side previously. But yeah, it's not good enough at Old Trafford, really.
I think, like you say, I think having the players to play it, I think, is a big issue. Dan has said like their midfield is much stronger than ours. He thinks 3-1 to Newcastle. I'd probably go there myself as well if I was taking the old rose tinted glasses off. But Dan was a big advocate for Anthony playing at right wing back at one point. Is that an option? And keeping Amad at the 10, Daz, what do you think? Having Anthony as the right wing back? Just so you have that little bit of an attacking presence, but he can do I actually think he does the defensive side probably better than he does the attacking side.
I was just going to say that, in all of the time that he's been at Manchester United, he's been trolled because he's not been productive at all as a winger. But if you look at the defensive part of his game as a winger, he's actually stronger than nearly every winger in the Premier League. He can get his sort of numbers show you that he can get the ball back. He can win the ball back. Now, granted, he's only got other attacking players to be a good comparison, but there's no shame in saying to a player, you're not a winger, you're a wing back. Because, I mean, we've done it in reverse, haven't we? We've done that with the likes of Gareth Bale over the years. You're not quite a left back, but you are. Sorry, you're not quite a wing back, but you are an incredible forward. Saka made the move up the pitch. Why can't players move further back, especially in a system like we play? And I think that it is a position that why we've got no left wing back and we are seeing Delo on the other side of the pitch. Why not try different options? Because Anthony's going to be one of them players that he's going to go in the summer. I would be annoyed to see him go if he then goes to another club and he was to play, a right wing back and he was to absolutely smash it. And we think, where was that play at United? I think given the need to change things up, I would definitely give him another go in that position, because I think defensively he can win the ball back. I don't think it'd be as good going forward, but like Ben said, I think this is going to be the sort of game where we are going to sit incredibly deep and we're going to be forced to sit incredibly deep, which tells me Ahmed's not going to be any good in that right wing back position, because you know what I mean. I would like him to be disciplined in the way, the manager, I'd like him to be disciplined in the way to say, I'm sticking with a 4-3-3, sorry, the 3-4-3 system. But given the fact that we've lost Bruno, I'd like him to try one attacking midfielder and maybe 2 strikers.
So, yeah.
And, you
Yeah,
know,
I mean,
just a
yeah.
slight change. Just
Yeah.
a slight change. Look, we could get beat 3-0, you know, like we have been 3-4-0. But it could create more goals, especially when you've got 2 attackers like Xerxes and Hoyland that do offer
Yeah.
something completely different. One to maybe drop a little bit deeper, or you've got the opportunity to play Garnacho up there and let him just sit a little bit, you know, sort of have that free role where he can sit back a little bit, move out into the wing position and just feel a little bit more comfortable. And then having, you know, maybe some sort of a hybrid system of a 1-1-1, or, you know, I'd much rather see that sort of change.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've said it in a number of shows. I've said it to you via text as a lot. The threat going forward has to be better. We have to be showing something in that final third of the pitch. And correct me if I'm wrong, hasn't Anthony come on at right back in games that we've been losing and we've ended up winning that game or something? Like, I'm sure it happened against City, and I'm sure it happened against, it might have been Bodo Glint or someone like that. So is there a role for him on the right? You know, maybe. But yeah, that is, I think that's where we are. None of us are really that confident, are we? I mean, we're sort of tinted glasses on, hoping for a 2-1. And I mean, if we play on the break and we get the win, who's going to care, really? Do you know what I mean? Okay, so we're going to look at a few of the reactionary takes on social media in the past week after the Wolves game, and there's been a few. Here's the first one. I'll throw this one to you, Ben. Are United in a relegation battle?
No, but currently form-wise, we'll get out of it ultimately, the position we're in, and we'll end up probably somewhere between 8th and 12th, I would say. But currently, I think it's quite an easy way to get clicks on social media is to say United are in, because ultimately we are, aren't we, form-wise? I don't know where we are.
Yeah.
We're probably down there with City, but I mean, before today, they were 18th in the form table. We're probably not far off. But yeah, I think it's going to be between 8th and 12th now.
I mean, for me, this has got to be the first time ever being a United fan, but I've actually looked at like when Leicester got beat early, I thought, oh, fucking great, you know, like they're not catching us. You know, I've been looking at the teams in the relegation zone. It's madness. So another one for you, Daz, another reactionary take, and we had a little bit of a sort of back and forth about this the other day, so we'll come to that one. If results carry on, if we lose to Liverpool, if we lose to Newcastle tomorrow, we lose to Arsenal, that'll be 6 defeats on the bounce. Remember, this isn't me saying this. This is like what I've seen on social media. Is Amorim in trouble? Or do questions start to be asked?
I'm gonna go one more fixture more. I think, given the form, given the quality, I'm gonna say, it's gonna sound really crappy to United fans say this. I think it's acceptable to come away from Newcastle, Liverpool, and Arsenal not winning them games, because all 3 of them teams right now are better than United. It doesn't sound good to say that, and yes, the Almighty has fallen. And I think, given the fact that they're 3 teams that arguably could be fighting for top 4 this year, well, Liverpool favourites to win the league, especially after today. Arsenal will be in the top 4, and Newcastle are finding that form, you know, and they could, you know, squeeze into the top 4 quite easily. I think you could forgive yourself losing to them, but if we lose to Southampton, given the fact that it would be then, what would that be? 5, 6 games on the bounce that we'll have lost.
7.
Will that be 7 at that point?
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not at that point, then I think he has to go. You know, it has to go. I mean, and we're not talking about beating teams that are better than us. We're talking, you know, we could lose to Southampton, Wolves, Bournemouth. You know, we should be beating these teams. Ipswich, we got a draw. There's 4 games there that Man United 100%, even as a mid-table club, should be beating these teams. Forest, 3-2, I thought we threw that away.
Yeah.
I know Forest are in a position where I think they're second in the table now, and probably the biggest shock of the Premier League so far. But we could have won that game. Same with the Spurs game. I felt like it was even a draw. It was a missed opportunity, But we are losing to teams that we should not be losing to, and with us regressing in every other element of the park, I think if we come away the next 4 games, 4 losses in 4 games, I think he has to go.
Okay, let's pass it to you, Ben. If we do lose these games, if we go to Liverpool next weekend, if we get done 4-5, we go to the Emirates again, get done sort of 2 or 3. Remember, this isn't me saying this. This is me being totally devil's advocate. I agree with what JJ's saying here. We should really give him time because he's inherited what is a lot of shit, really. Where do you stand on how much pressure is on the manager then?
I'll put he won't get sacked. I don't think that'll be the case because he's Ineos's first man, effectively, which, albeit they've made some questionable decisions, I think if they just went out and sacked him before the end of the season, they would look ridiculous. I think what might happen is internal pressure might increase. Like when he's going into meetings, they'll be saying, look, you really need to turn this round. And then externally as well, the fans looking in, he's getting a bit of leeway because we all kind of accept that the players aren't good enough. He needs a transfer window. He probably needs a pre-season. But as soon as that kind of rolls into next year, like Dad says, some of the teams we've been playing, Bournemouth at home, we should be beating them regardless of how good they are form-wise. Notts Forest, we should be beating them. Newcastle at home, we shouldn't be worrying about. I didn't worry about Newcastle since I was born up until a couple of years ago because they used to come to United and we just beat them. Similar with Villa, we used to go to Villa, we just used to beat them. And then now it's like we're struggling against these teams. So I think, to condense that, I don't think he gets sacked, but the pressure is creeping up.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he will. Hold on, Daz. I will come back to you. Hold on, I will come back. I don't think he should get sacked or that he will get sacked. But Dan makes a point here. Like Amorim should be fine. He should be given time and all that, unless he keeps picking the same players that aren't working. Is that kind of what Ten Hag did, Daz? Did he keep doing the same thing? And
I think he needs to. He's in a tough position because he needs. Some of these players just need time to gel now because there's one thing that they've never had, even under Eric Ten Hag. We never really had a set 11, did we? That you'd say that this was the 11 we're going to play 9 out of 10 times. This is, Ten Hag very rarely had a back 4, which didn't help him. But there's certain players. I've highlighted a couple. Onana and Martinez in the same team, statistically speaking, don't work. Ugarte and Kobe Mainoo separately are absolutely phenomenal, but together they don't work. Mazraoui as a wing back for me is not working in comparison to how good he was in a back 3. There's got to be, especially after these 4 games, if he does keep his job, there has got to be a way where he says that this team isn't working. I'm going to have to bring Obi Martin up. I'm going to have to play Collier. I'm going to have to play Fletcher. I've not got a choice. I'm going to have to do, just throw the rule book out. I'm going to have to go back to the 4-2-3-1 and just explain to the fans in the press conference that we are a team with a long-term ambition of playing 3-4-3. Unfortunately, this team, having tried it for 14, 15 games, can't play this current system. So until we can get a pre-season under a belt, we are going to have to go back to what they're more familiar with, which could be the 4-3-2, 4-2-3-1 system. And then use, because the 4-2-3-1 system going forward isn't massively different to what Man United play now. In the transition, they're very similar. what's different is at the back. But obviously, we've gone from being a team that can get clean sheets to a team that can't, a team that wasn't conceding that many goals to a team that's now conceding 2, 3, 4 goals a game. So he has to acknowledge that either he's not got the players to play the team that he wants, or this system just doesn't work at Manchester United. There's got to be some sort of accountability from him, especially if we lose 4 games. On the flip side, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, and I can't justify making a comment like this at all, but we could come out the next 4 games with a win in every game. You know, I genuinely could. I'm not saying we will, and I can't justify that. But Newcastle is a team that we should be beating. Liverpool, I think they're waiting for that crash. I think that they came to us last year. Well, they came to us last year in the FA Cup. Man United was in really poor form, and Liverpool's form was just starting to pick up, wasn't it? And everybody says they're going to smash Man United 8-9, 10-0, and we beat them in the FA Cup semi-final. It was very much a smash and grab win, but we beat them. No, I think again they're having their own issues in that team, and I think it can be exploited. And then Southampton, a team that I'd expect us to win even in this current form. So we could come out of this 4 wins out of 4. Again, I'm not saying that we will, but if we came out of that with 3 draws and 1 win, I think we'd consider that being a good result. It shouldn't, but if we draw the next 3 games and beat Southampton, we've not lost in the last 4 games, which is a little bit of a shift to what we've been seeing. So tough.
I think if we keep it respectable, this is how I look at it. If we keep it respectable over these next 3 games and not take a real tater in, I think it's okay. I mean, we said on a few shows ago, will the fans have the belly for what is going to be a real rough 6 months? And I hope he doesn't shy away from his style, because that's what Ten Hag did, and he did it far too early. He came in with a style that he wanted to play, and because it wasn't working, he binned it off and just tried to change it, and he was never the same after that. Is this a fair comment here, Ben? Ultimately, the fault lies with Ineos with the way they handled it. If we get Amorim in the summer, like last summer, when Ten Hag probably should have left, Amorim has the whole summer to implement his style on the players. I mean, I think he said in his press conference the other day, I think he said since he's come in, he's had 4 training sessions because of how quickly the games have been coming around, and he's trying to implement a whole new style, a whole new way of thinking when they're playing. If Ineos would have pulled their finger out in the summer and went to get their man, would things be better? And there'd obviously been players brought in that he'd have wanted, and it would have been more of his team. Do you think a lot of the blame lies with Ineos with this storm that we're having to cope with as United fans at the moment?
Yeah, I think it probably does. I think it highlights a bit of poor planning, a bit of listening to fan sentiment, because I was one of them crying out for Ten Hag to stay. And then 9 games later or whatever it was, I turned around and I was like, this isn't the guy, he needs to go. So it's a good job we're not in charge, but ultimately Ineos have also listened to something or come to the same conclusion that a lot of the fans were coming to. For Amorim, I think if he can get through this season, respectfully, I think if we finished 8th, we'd probably look back and say, okay, I'd take that. It's not great, is it, ultimately? But get into the summer, get some of the players, and he'll then have the respect to go to the board and say, we've finished 8th. Manchester United shouldn't be finishing 8th. Go and get me these players. And I think it might turn out to be a bit of a blessing, because if we'd have sacked Ten Hag and he'd have come in and we'd have just started playing terribly and he'd actually got a few of his players in, we might have looked at it even more and said, he's not the one. So I think it might be a benefit. I think Jamie Redknapp said something similar where it's a benefit. It's highlighting the issues in the squad. So ultimately, only time's going to tell, isn't it? I think next year will be the big question.
Yeah, I think you are. I mean, you learn a lot more when times are difficult, don't you? You learn a lot more about the players and about the fan base as well, I think. Because I find it mad going on social media and seeing hammering out and stuff like that. I find that mad. But it's the time we live in, I suppose. Given the fact that
before we move on, Andy, can I answer that same question? Because I actually have a different opinion to Ben on this. I think Ineos haven't done anything wrong. I think they did the right thing. I think they wanted to sack the manager. Unfortunately, Thomas Tuchel and Nagelsmann didn't want any part of this fucking shit show that we see at Man United. I think the idea was to sack the manager in the summer. And I think Ineos went to the market with X, Y, and Z, and they said, let's come to Manchester United. Now, I don't know if certain managers like De Zerbi potentially was completely priced out and they wanted this amount of money and Ineos wanted to pay this much. We don't know why these managers didn't come, but unfortunately for us, Man United wasn't in a position to swap the manager in the summer. Man United then probably made a conversation, and I think Dan Ashworth might have been one of the driving forces in this, that said, well, let's stick with the man that we've got because we've had 2 cups in 2 years. Let's give him a little bit more money and let's see if he can turn this around. And I think we got 10 games in or whatever it was, and Ineos and Barada and, these big players, and they said, we've had enough. The list is now Graham Potter, Southgate and whoever else, Thomas Frank, I don't know, but we might be able to get Amarim. And from what I can gather in interviews, Amarim said to Manchester United, I'd love to take the job, but not mid-season. And Man United have ultimately come out and said now or never. So I genuinely think that Ineos wanted to sack the manager in the summer. I think that was the plan. Unfortunately, I think they put a shortlist together and all 3 of their managers maybe turned us down. They were only speculating who their managers was, but we know that Man United spoke to Thomas Tuchel. We know they had a conversation with Kieran McKenna. Maybe Kieran McKenna felt scolded by the club, having previously been there as a coach. Maybe he realised that there was a bigger issue there and he didn't want to mess with his progression as a coach, touching Man United this early in his career. We don't know, but I genuinely hate the fact that people are blaming Ineos when I can see that I think that we did have a short list and these managers did turn us down.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, with that, it would be more that it was common knowledge that they wanted Ten Hag out and they did want Tuchel. They kind of explored other options. And for me, then you're starting the season on the back foot because we all knew as fans, as soon as we hit that bumpy road, Ten Hag was going to go at some point. We knew that was going to happen. And I think if we know that, the players know that, and then for me, then the effort of the players goes down a little bit. It all has an inevitability about it. But yeah, I think you're both right. To be fair, I think JJ says it right in the comments. Ineos just ballsed up basically what they were trying to do, and we're kind of suffering from that now.
I do agree that it's not a good position for a manager to be in after 10 games, no pre-season. You've not even got an international break. I'd much rather was Amarim terminated as soon as possible and let him have that first international break. Just, for anything. But it's not a good position for him to be in, to take over a United team that's struggling anyway, not working. He's been told to come in and change. Obviously wants to change everything from the style, the system, the formation. He's obviously got to change the culture in the football club, which I think they're really struggling with. I think that it is a tough position, but unfortunately, football's a results business, and at some point you've got to look at the results, haven't you? And you've got to say, because you got to think, we spoke about this. Man United are not in a relegation battle. Unfortunately, I think at the end of the next 4 games, I think we could be as close to the relegation zone as we've probably ever been without actually being relegated. What does that do to the share price of Man United? Man United are a public trading company now, and they've got to answer to, stockholders and board members. How low do Man United go before Adidas say we've had enough? Snapdragon, we didn't sign up for this.
I think with people like Adidas, even if we was in League Two, I still think we'd sell absolute ridiculous amount of shirts. We'd sell. We are still Man United. We're just massively shit at the moment. So it's the end. It's the end of 2024, Ben. How would you rate 2024? Out of 10, what would you rate 2024? It's been a real slog, hasn't it?
It's difficult. Ooh.
What would your highlight of 2024 be, and the low point of 2024?
FA Cup, undoubtedly. That kind of encapsulated everything you want United to be against a team that we all hate, and just bottled it up all into one day, which was brilliant for the fans, and it kind of changed the sentiment probably a little bit towards Ten Hag, which we're paying for now ultimately. Low point, I went to the game at Old Trafford, which was bad. But it's recency bias, but now feels bad as it's ever been for me personally. I'm of an age where I've never seen United in this position. And as the performances kind of get gradually worse and worse, it just feels like now. Yeah, that's
fair. JJ in the comments says the FA Cup. I think that would be across the board. That was definitely the high point of United this year. The low point, Daz, I'll throw it out to you. I think you'll agree with the FA Cup, but what's been the low point?
Low point. I think it's Marcus Rashford, the way that it's ending, because he's an academy graduate, and we pride ourselves as a football club to support our academy players. I mean, I said this a couple of weeks back, that the academy isn't there to create 100 Marcus Rashfords or 100 Messis or 100 Ronaldos. It's to feed English football with good quality footballers. And even in the last 10 years, we've done that. You know, League One, League Two championships are surrounded by United Academy graduates, some of which are absolutely killing it. Alenga, smashing it at Forest. You know, so I think for me, a low point is to see what would have been. I mean, my dad calls him the chosen son. He thinks he was Marcus Rashford was our Wayne Rooney, you know, the academy player that could have been gone on and suppressed Wayne Rooney, gone on and to been that legend for the club in a new era. And he obviously hasn't done that. And I think he was a chosen son by the fans. We've stayed behind him. We've got behind him. We've supported him through the bad days. So to see this come into quite an abrupt ending, to the point where he could leave the club in quite a negative way, quite sad for me, because I don't feel we've had an academy graduate leave the club at such a low point, having been so positive as a footballer, if that makes sense.
I agree. I mean, for me, the low point, it's just been the amount of negative, not even on the pitch, but the amount of negative stuff that's just come out of United this past year. It's just been poor. I think Rashford's one, Sancho I thought was handled horrendously. Ineos, we'll get into that again in a minute. United just feel really dirty to me at the moment. I mean, I'm over 40 years of age, so I've kind of seen quite a lot of United, and now it feels, it's really stinking for me at the moment, United. And that's not just the playing side of it. I mean, the playing side can get sorted, but just how the club's run and stuff like that is just really stinking, man. But we'll stick with the Rashford Academy thing. Coming out from the Mail today, Ben, United are apparently struggling to agree deals for Mainu and Garnacho. Now, is that a consequence of us being shit, or is that a cost-cutting thing? Is that United just being skint and we can't afford to pay them what they want? Are we not the pull? And then, other stories are saying Garnacho's got Atletico Madrid sniffing around him. Are there just bigger fish now that players want to play for?
To me, it feels like a bit of an Ineos cost-cutting, and I think they're probably being a bit stingy. It feels like as well that story's come out probably from an agent, probably from Garnacho's agent, which I think is his brother, isn't it? His agent.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So whether that story is being put out to kind of kick United into gear to get this sorted. For me, we can't, like Daz has said about our academy, we can't pride ourselves on being the club that has this amazing academy, has had an academy player in the match day squad for however long, and then bin off two of our most important key best players that we've produced in the. I know Garnacho came to us at 15, 16 or something like that, but ultimately they've come through the academy. They are good enough to play for Manchester United. Do not let them leave the club. Rashford's had enough time to kind of prove to us that he's not going to be what we're expecting. So you can understand him maybe leaving, and he's racked up to 350 grand a week on wages. I don't know what Mainu's on. I don't know what Garnacho's on, but it feels like they're not on enough to be getting rid of them because we can't agree a deal.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think JJ's quite close to where I sort of sit on this. I think people like Garner and Mainu are probably seeing players like Rashford, like Casemiro, maybe like players that aren't necessarily first teamers, taking home like a real big wad of cash, and they're probably going, well, I wouldn't mind a little bit of that bag as well. And Ineos are maybe saying, well, actually, we're not going down that route anymore. And if we are asking, there may be other clubs that are offering more. I mean, like Daz said earlier about Ahmad's out of contract next summer, possibly, or the summer after, very soon. And now teams are going to be and now teams are going to be able to offer, like Arsenal. If Arsenal come in Champions League football, challenging for honours. So do you think that? Do you agree, Daz, or do you think is it a cost cutting, or is it a consequence that United have just fallen off and we will struggle to keep them?
I think there's a bit of both. I think we see obviously Varane leave the club, and I think that was a cost cutting measure. I think Varane was on 300k a week. I think round about that figure, and I think he genuinely wanted to stay. I don't think he had any intentions of leaving. I think Ineos offered him a contract that was probably half what he's currently got, and he basically said, I'm not taking that. And Varane, I've earned the right to be on 300k, and you could argue maybe he has. So obviously we allowed him to leave. I think Marcus Rashford again, another one being on 350, 375 a week. I think given his form, I think it makes sense to move him on, especially because it's almost impossible for a player like Marcus Rashford to come down in wage at this point in his career. Again, I think we'll see the same with Casemiro. This is a point that we want to keep you at, and if you don't want to stay at that, we're happy to move you on. So I think there is a lot of cost-saving measures happening at the club, and I think in a lot of ways I can get behind that, because the only ways that you're going to create a player like Mo Salah is it you really want to come and play for the club. Mo Salah ultimately joined Liverpool because he liked the idea of the project. He came from the Premier League anyway, from an academy point of view. So he knew the football, he knew the culture. But one thing Liverpool have not had an issue with until potentially now is no players wanted to be on 350k a week, because no player at the club has been on 350k a week. I think ultimately Liverpool are having the problem that United have been having now, because they gave Mo Salah that big contract, and you've now got Trent and Virgil van Dijk that are like, we want 350k a week. We want to be on the same wage as Mo Salah. Problem is, once you've done it for one player, you've got to do it for the next player, the next player, and before you know it, you've got 5-6 players on 350k a week, and you're like, how did we get here? Problem is, you're then attracting players like Casemiro and Varane that want to come to your club, not to add to the trophy cabinet, but because you're willing to pay them money. So in a lot of ways, I'm really happy that Ineos want to lower that wage budget and say that this is what we value a player at. Yes, we're going to lose your Casemiros, your Marcus Rashfords of the world. Probably not going to get a Paul Pogba in. But what we will do is we'll bring in young, hungry players that want to play for the football club, that want to get behind the project. And wage isn't going to be a stumbling block down the line, because these players know that Man United are no longer that club that pays that sort of wage. And I think from a long-term vision, I think Ineos are doing a really good thing. unfortunately, in football, you've got Marcus Rashford that I don't think you're going to get more. Even if he stayed at United, you wouldn't get more than 4 or 5 years out of him at this point. There's no reason you can't just keep him at the club for a few more years, because it is quality that United do need, and then look to replace him in the next few years. Slowly filter out. A bit like with Varane, it was a good opportunity to get rid of Varane. We replaced him with a couple of midfielders. It was just a good deal all round, wasn't it? Especially with the Mazraoui deal coming in. These ways that filtering out high profile players on bigger wages and bringing in, some hidden gems. There's ways of doing that. I just feel it's all a bit too much, too drastic, too, what I mean? Problem is, we could find ourselves dropping to such a low point that United sort of struggled to get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixture of everything. I think the club have put us, like the Ed Woodward years, put us in such a hole with a few players. Like we had Martial on our books for Christ, I have no idea how long we had him on for, but he was on like $250,000, wasn't he, for so long, and he was pants for about 5 years of that. But it's so hard to move players on in it. And then for me, it kind of goes back a little bit to what we said earlier in the show about desire. And I think Rashford's lost that desire since he signed that massive deal. Like before he signed that deal, he was on a very good wage, no doubt. But he was at the point of having to prove himself, and he was putting sort of 7/8 every game. And Ahmad's doing exactly the same now, in my opinion. He's busting his nuts every single game. He won't be on a huge wage, but he's showing the desire that we want everyone to show. And for me, there's a few big time Charlies in that dressing room that just don't do it. And I think that's a massive issue with United, and I think it's a massive issue with football nowadays. Really, a lot of them get to a point, and they just think they've made it, but it's an issue that we've made ourselves. Like Ed Woodward, I still think now we're suffering from the Ed Woodward years because we were so bad with money. I think we're still suffering with it. But we'll stick with Ineos, Ben. Another cost cutting exercise. Loads of money that they're going to be saving on this one. The club are cutting their 40,000 a year funding to a charity to support ex-players. 40,000. That Ineos have said that they're cutting it so they can invest it in other areas of the squad that need improving. Really?
Yeah, that one doesn't sit right with me. I think if you're pushing out a player like Marcus Rashford on X amount, like we've said about, I can understand that because it is a monumental amount of money we're paying for these players. But in terms of 45, it might cost them more in fan sentiment and the fans that they'll lose from that.
Yeah.
Because there will be fans that are annoyed and say, right, I'm not going to another game this season, or I'm not paying for whatever it is. And ultimately, United should be best in class, and we're not operating like that. Even though we're not the best in class on the field, Gary Neville says that all the time. They need to be best in class at this, then. And ultimately, you have to pay for that somewhere along the line. And you have to... I've said that Sir Jim's good at the corporate side of stuff, and they've come in, they've looked at a profit and loss, and they've said, right, we need to get back X amount into this club every single year. And they've probably looked at the lowest barrier to entry thing. What can we stop paying? Because ultimately, the biggest cost for the club is the wages, but you can't get rid of all your players. But what you can do is you can turn around to Sir Alex and you can say, are you all right not having a salary anymore? You can turn around to the charity and turn around. But the actual impact on the fans and just the visual, the optics of it to us is terrible, especially when we're playing badly. If they were doing all of this when we were playing well, you'd probably forget about it. But ultimately, charity is a massive part, and it should be a massive part of the club.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I said, there's the PR side of it. It just stinks, doesn't it? It really stinks. JJ said that if Ineos are cutting these payments to the charity to fund the women's side, which has been a little bit neglected, would that be okay? Would that, as they've said, they're going to fund other areas of the team with this saving of money?
I think sometimes, I mean, Ben's just hit the nail on the head about it being a PR nightmare. There's certain funding I think you can cut. You can come out and you can say, we're allowing 20% of the squad to leave because we want our wage bill to be at X amount. But people might not agree with some of the players leaving, but you'd respect what they're trying to create. Same with cutting the staff. If they came in and they sacked 40% of the staff. Now, I didn't initially have an issue with that because I saw Elon Musk do the same thing when he took over Twitter. Apparently, he sacked 50% of the staff. And he said, based on his assessment of Twitter, 50% of the staff wasn't needed and they wasn't doing a great deal, and they cut their wages in half by getting rid of 50% of people that wasn't doing a great deal or adding any value to the business. I'd like to think that them staff went for the same reason that, Man United have just been run poorly for that long, that there is people in the club getting paid to do absolutely nothing, or there's people in there that are, overpaid, or these two teams are too big, that sort of thing. But tell me honestly, 40,000. I don't. When you think Marcus Rashford is getting paid 350k a week, now
I mean, what would they get from a home gate?
You know what I mean? Man United agreed a contract with Marcus Rashford, so I'm not blaming Marcus Rashford for being on 350k a week. Man United are stupid enough to pay him that sort of money. That's on Manchester United. That's not on Marcus Rashford. I wouldn't turn down that amount of money.
No.
You know what I mean? So I'm not blaming Rashford for that, but 40,000. Sometimes you've got to look at a cost-saving measure and say, we're going to cut 50% of the staff. What is the PR comeback from that?
Yeah.
Can we live with that? Can we spin that into a positive? There is no way you can spin off £40,000 in a professional football club. That
It's pointless.
You know what I mean? It's pointless, but the PR nightmare is potentially going to cost them more than 40 grand a year, in my opinion. It's
I mean, for me,
positivity around the club. I mean, arguably, it was them ex-players, right or wrong, that stopped Cristiano Ronaldo going to our biggest rivals. Them ex-players that got together and said, we're picking the phone up, and especially players like Rio that wasn't on our payroll, but they're all spamming Ronaldo saying, you won't be forgiven at Man United if you go to City. And then it opened doors and it brought Ronaldo back to the club again. That didn't turn out to be the right decision for United at the time, but I don't think I could live with him going to Man City and scoring 50 goals a season, which I think he probably could have done there, and actually having his better days and another Ballon d'Or at Man City over United. I couldn't have lived with that, especially for one of our biggest legends. So we thank our ex-legends for doing that. Problem is, what happens in a few years when maybe we need our legends to talk for the club, and they're like, not interested no more. Look at the way the club's treated me, So, I just think some of it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm going to stay behind Ineos, though, and the reason being is because I think there has been some positive stuff with them becoming in the club. There has been some positive changes, and as a football fan, we don't quite know the reasoning behind all of the decisions they're making, and maybe if we did, we'd maybe support them a little bit more. For all we know, the ladies are getting a brand new training ground, the ladies are getting a brand new stadium. We don't know this. We only know the short-term plan, and that's that the ladies have been told to go back and train at Lees Park, so the men can use their facilities at Carrington. And you know what I mean? We that's all we know is a short-term plan. We don't know what the bigger picture is. But I mean, I said this to you a couple of weeks ago, didn't I? That Ineos need, as owners, 100% Manchester United first team's their cash cow. They bring in 80-90% of the money, so that ultimately has to be their priority. But as owners, they have a responsibility to the ladies, the youth team, the fans, the legends, and they need to manage this better across all fronts. They can't just say, that's our cash cow, that's what we're focusing on, and let shit on the likes of Alex Ferguson, the ladies, the academy. The problem that you're going to get there is in 10 years' time, when we sit here and we say Man United are not producing any academy players anymore, well, ultimately that's because parents don't want to send the club the kids to a club that treat the players like crap, or ladies. We stop attracting good quality ladies, and we find ourselves being a mid-table ladies team where we're actually quite fortunate that we are pushing the Champions League sort of area with our ladies. It is a good position to be in. All our legends want to take part in the legend stuff, but what happens if in 10 years our legends become Ben Thornley, Luke Chadwick, and none of the other big players want to get involved anymore because of how poorly they've been treated? It changes the culture massively for the football club. And given the last 16, 18 years we've had under the Glazers, Ineos had to do things positively. They had to do things differently. Not all good. We won't always support the owner's decisions, especially like a club like United. But it feels to me as if the more this starts to unravel, the Ineos are cut from the same cloth as the Glazers.
Well, that brings me that brings me nicely onto my next bit. Would the Glazers, or why didn't the Glazers, Ben? Why didn't they cut prices? Why didn't they put ticket prices up? Why didn't they tell Alex Ferguson to do one? Why didn't they cut the funding for the charity, for the ex-pros? Why didn't the Glazers do these things? Given the fact that we all know that they were taking a fair amount of coin out of United, why didn't the Glazers do these things?
I think they've had the luxury of getting in at the right time, and probably they're not out of it at the minute, but operationally they're kind of coming out of it now. They timed it perfectly. Ultimately, they went to the club and said, right, can I have X amount on credit to buy this football club, and then we're going to draw out a load of money and we're not going to do much work. That's the dream, isn't it? Ultimately, if I could go to America and do that, I would do it, because I don't care about the club. I've got no sentiment towards the fans, the area, anything like that. But I'm going to go to them and get, what if they've drawn out 100, 150 million in dividends? If you can go and do that, it's a good business deal. But I think Ineos have come in now at a time where we're struggling PSR-wise, we're struggling on the pitch. Everything's a struggle financially. And they're looking at it, and they've probably compared it to their other businesses and said, how do we get this back on track? And it is making all of these cuts. But the other side of it as well is United are a corporate entity, all of that type of stuff. But at heart, we're a football community. That's what it should be about. And I don't think they've got that side of it quite right. They talk to the fans initially, but then all of this cuts and whatever they're doing is a bit cloak and dagger. Like we hear through the media, that's it. And all we're hearing at the minute is Sir Jim's pulled this money, he's pulled this money, he's pulled this money, without any explanation. I wouldn't mind if they came out and did an interview and said, right, this is how bad the situation is, and just laid out the figures. And if they turned around to us and said, we need to get 100 million a year back into our pockets to do this, this, and this, then we'd probably be able to accept it. But
I think that's massive, isn't it? The communication thing, which we've not had under the Glazers. I think that's what we know we're paying £100 million a year in loan payments. Maybe if Jim came out and he said, unfortunately, the loan isn't going anywhere, and that's not my decision as an owner, that's a group decision between us and the Glazers. Unfortunately, whether you like it or not, dividends are still going to be leaving the club. But we don't want that to affect the football club anymore. So we need to bring £100 million a year back into the football club to mean that makes no difference anymore. We can run as a football club like any other football club, but we've got to save £100 million a year. And this is the way we know how. You won't like them decisions. We won't like the ticket prices going up, but the communication's been there that you understand it.
Yeah, I thought we were going to get better transparency from them, to be honest, when they came in. I thought we'd just hear a lot more from the club than we did with the Glazers, but that hasn't really happened.
But we've had a thing to remember with that, though, is the Ineos are in partnership with the Glazers, and whether we like it or not, that has to stay a positive a relationship. There is obviously, how would the Glazers take it if Jim came out and he said, they're draining the fucking football club, and the only way I can do it is to save money. That's ultimately means that the Glazers
Yeah.
and NEOS are going to be at each of a stroke, which I think would be worse in that position than under a bad owner. So maybe this is Jim saying nothing for the benefit of not ruining a Glazer relationship. Doesn't
Yeah.
help us as a sort of thing. But again, this is what I'm trying to say, is we don't always know what's happening behind the scenes. We don't know the reasoning behind things. So it's almost impossible to slate Ineos, especially after 12 months of being in charge. Let's see how this affects us 6-7 years down the line, because ultimately any decisions that are being made have got to be long-term decisions.
Yeah.
I think I actually sat and somebody asked me questions today, and that was something I was going to mention to you guys. Was we better with Ed Woodward being part of the club? No, I'm not saying running the show, but being part of the club. Now, I look back at some of the commercial deals that Ed Woodward put in place, from the noodle brand. I don't know if any guys remembered that, to the guaranteed money from the Chevrolet deal, that if we dropped out the Champions League, we wouldn't lose money. Selling a 10-year naming rights of Carrington. Who does that? Sells a naming rights to a ground, that nobody can see because it's not a private road. But he did that. I would have always liked to have seen Ed Woodward not leave the club, but move into a commercial director role, and
Yeah.
then have someone like Omar Barada come in and run the football side of things. Because I think what Ed Woodward did as an investment banker was really, really good. And I think that financially, Man United are in a worse place, having lost Ed Woodward, which leaves us in a position where we're now saving money, because ultimately an investment banker's job's to keep the money high.
Yeah. I mean, that was the issue, wasn't it? We had non-football people running the football side, whereas if we had Ed Woodward in a, like you say, in the more of a financial side, and then someone
I think
controlling
we just
the
need a
football
balance,
side.
don't we? We just
Yeah.
need a balance. I think we need financial people, because we are a public trading company. We are on the stock market, and the share price, unfortunately, dictates a lot of things at Manchester United. We need an investment banker in there somewhere, or an accountant, a super accountant. Maybe, given the way that we were stung as a football fan base, Ed Woodward was the wrong man. But I would have no issue with Manchester United bringing an investment banker back into the club to help with this side of the club, but under the knowledge as a football fan base that we know is a commercial.
It's like what
purchase and not a football.
It's like what we thought with Ineos, wasn't it? Getting the right people doing the right jobs, and hopefully it will start moving in a better way. So we've had them a year, Ben. Around Christmas was the year, a year since Ineos brought their, I don't know, 25, whatever it was. How would you rate the first year under Ineos controlling the football inside? I mean, they gave Ten Hag a lot of money, invested a lot in the summer. They've done a lot of questionable things. How would you rate it?
I think, to be honest, the one positive I've seen is they are actively trying to put a structure in place. Whether they've got it right, obviously we've seen what's happened with Dan Ashworth, that hasn't worked out. And I think the structure in the transfer window looked a little bit more controlled. Whether that was perception or kind of, I don't know, we thought it was Ineos controlling it, so it looked better. But it felt better as a fan. I think that's the one positive. But again, with United, it feels like everything good that comes into United slowly gets thrown into this pot and ultimately gets dragged down to a level that it's not at. And that's Ineos's job ultimately, to do that. Like, even the players, you think of Mazraoui when he came in, he's been brilliant up until the last couple of weeks, and then it slowly looks like he's dipping off. And that just seems to happen across the board, whatever it is. Rating wise, 5, 6, something like that. I think the PR is the big thing going forward. They need to get that right.
Yeah, they need a good PR story to come out, don't they? That they saved a cat from a tree or just something, so it sounds really good. You know what I mean?
I think,
but the transfer side of things, I think I remember going back to the summer. I was like buzzing. It felt like we were moving like a proper club. We were selling players properly. We were bringing players in properly. We were doing things. You know, we sold Wan-Bissaka to bring in Mazraoui. It's like, oh, it's good business. This, we're not overpaying. It's all good. But the proof is in the pudding. I think it's going to take time with Ineos, with Amorim. It's just have we got the belly for it. But 2025, Daz, let's move to what we hope for in 2025. What are your realistic hopes and, I don't know, desires for 2025? What do you realistically want?
From a football club point of view, I'd like a decision to be made on Old Trafford, and a definitive decision, whether that is it's going to cost too much and we're going to renovate Old Trafford and it's going to come up to the 21st century, whatever, or it is going to be built by X date and it's going to be down the bottom of the, car park, wherever, near the ticket, wherever, you know what I mean? I've got no issues. I just want a decision on it. Obviously, the money's currently being spent in Carrington. I'd like, from a football club, I'd like us to have a clear direction of even the short-term plans of the academy and the ladies team. Are they going to join the rest of the club at Carrington once the renovations have been done, and they're going to go back to their training pitches? Are they going to have their own dedicated golf club bought and they're going to get a smaller facility built with a little stadium? We don't know, but I'd like, there to be a decision on this from a group. I'd like us to continue to save money as a football club in the transfer market, because I think, like I say, I think Ben said it, that maybe it's a bit of an illusion because it was under Ineos. I think transfers have been a little bit better since Richard Arnold took over. I don't think there was as bad as they was previous under Ed Woodward, if that makes sense. Still wasn't perfect, but I think there wasn't bad. It wasn't. We didn't have bad transfer windows. We brought in players that did excite us for the right reasons, but I'd like the transfer to continue in the direction that it's in. Again, I mean, we said this a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, that putting these people in place, this structure, it's going to take time to build them recruitment and then scouting circles up to then start. It could take 4 or 5 years before we see a real benefit in the transfer market. But having that structure that players are not going to be paid over this amount, we're not going to be bringing in players at 30 years old just because they've won 10 La Ligas with Real Madrid. There need to be players that are going to add value to the football club, both financially and on the pitch. I think the short-term goal has got to be to get to the end of the season with as little embarrassment as possible. Whether that means we finish 7th, 8th in the league, well, let's call it top 10 for the sake of top half of the table. We finish in the top half of the table, but we have a really good run in the Europa League. Whether that means we win it or we get to the last 4, given what we've been through for Amorim, that wouldn't be a bad position to be in. I mean, we saw the benefits of Chelsea not being in the Champions League and the Europa League have done for their team. They freeze up a few more training sessions for you, and that's obviously benefited Chelsea. We need a strong summer. I think by the end of the season, Ruben Amorim and Ineos need to have had this conversation of who's staying and who's going. If they make the decision that Rashford is going, he needs to go. No messing about over 3-4 windows trying to get an extra 10 grand for him. If he's going to go, he's got to go. Same with Garnacho. If he's going to go, he's got to go. Same with Bruno. If he's going to go, he's going to go. Decisions need to be made and we need to be ruthless about them decisions. Having seen the transfer window that we've had over the last two transfer windows, I'm very confident that we'll be bringing in the right players for the right reasons, right caliber. Not every player's going to be great as well. I mean, not every transfer Alex Ferguson made was great, and I think it's important to remember that there is going to be a few passengers that are going to be brought in, but unfortunately that's football. Man City's arguably best team in the last 10 years, spent £100 million on a big passenger that's done nothing for the last 12 months, especially in Grealish. Even the best managers and the best run clubs get it wrong. So I'm not expecting every transfer to be right. I'd like to think that this time next year, Manchester United are, I won't go as far as to say that to be in a title challenge, but I'd like us to be in a position where Nottingham Forest are now, that's definitely looking like a team that can finish in the top 4, although
winning football matches.
I mean, I think deep down we all
Those good
know
old
that
days.
Nottingham Forest are going to drop out of that top 4 at some point. I think we all know that, if we're honest with ourselves. But their fan base is buzzing. They're in a title challenge in their head. Second coming into Christmas. I'd love to be in a similar position, a really positive position, that we look at the last 12 months and we say that's 8 out of 10. That's 8 out of 10. We look fantastic as a football club. Ruben Amorim's starting to cook. We're still in the League Cup, still in the FA Cup. If we win the Europa League this year, we're doing okay in the Champions League, that sort of thing. I think the short-term goal has got to be to finish the season with as little embarrassment as possible, and let Ruben Amorim show us why we'd give him the time. Well, we'd let him have a bad season in the summer. Let him really rebuild. Let him bring his players in, because then there's no excuses.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there will be a massive turnaround of the playing staff, because they're just not good enough, are they, at the minute? And I think with us being as skint as we are, I think we're going to have to offload a lot to bring a lot in. But Ben, what are your hopes for 2025?
I just want to say get rid of this feeling of dread before every game, to be honest. It just feels like we have these massive peaks, like against Man City in the FA Cup, against Man City the other week, against Liverpool in the FA Cup. We can still do that, because ultimately them big games come down to fine margins, and we still have some players that, like an Amadial, can pull you through them games. But I just want us to be a bit more just consistent. Whether that means consistent, but we're going to finish 6th or 7th. I think like Brighton, I never really look at Brighton and think, oh, they've been embarrassed there. A couple of times they'll get beaten, and understandably they'll get beaten against Liverpool and teams like that. But they kind of beat the teams you'll expect them to beat, they draw with the teams you'll expect them to draw with, and they lose to the top of the league. I just want us to be that, which it doesn't sound like much to ask for, does it? But I think that the transfer market's the big thing, because if we're going to keep this manager, if we're going to back him, we need to go and get some players that can actually play a system, and then we can judge him. I feel like we can't judge him at this point.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, that is and it's been my sort of big one for a few years now, for us just to be competitive again. And that's not to be competitive winning the title. That's to be like tomorrow night against Newcastle. Like right now, I'm thinking, shit, we're going to get turned over like 2 or 3 here. But I want to go into games like that thinking, yeah, we're going to give them a real good go, and we're going to die trying. If we lose, we're going to lose like on our swords, like 3-2, 4-3. We're going to give it a really good go. And I think if we can sit here next December and we've become a team that can give it a go, can compete with everyone in the league. Like you say, I think Brighton's a really good example. You've got Brighton, you've got Bournemouth, Brentford possibly. Just teams that just go out there and just give everything. If United could be that, I think that'd be a very good stepping stone to get to being a good team again. But yeah, the transfer window is huge, massive. I do think we do have a few players. We do have a little sort of nucleus of a few players like De Ligt, Ugarte, Bruno possibly, Højlund, Ahmad. There's a few there that I think if you sprinkle with a bit of real quality, I think they'll become even better. But it really feels like a big 2025 for me. It feels like a big year for me. It really does. But yeah, I think we're going to end that there. And hopefully tomorrow we can get a win. I don't know how hopeful I am, to be honest. I literally can't remember the last time I sat on this show and thought, yeah, we're going to do them. We're going to beat these. And genuinely and actually fought it. Do you know what I mean? I mean, even Everton, when we beat them 4-0, I could have swore I thought that was going to be a draw or something. But yeah, it's just United in it at the moment. But we will all watch it. We'll all go and see it. We'll all cheer them on. It's just what we're doing. It's like
With
Go on, Daz.
2025 then, Andy, and that probably same question to Ben, is I look back at the last 10 years post Alex Ferguson and look at the years where we finished in the top 4, maybe not deserving so, but we have. And you look at players like Cristiano Ronaldo, Paul Pogba, you look at real quality that we've had in that team. I mean, we're talking pure quality that even when they're crap, it's still quality. And that quality's got you top 4. And I think United's lack that. Where do we get that quality next year? Because I'm all up for bringing the wage bill down. I'm all up for attracting young players that play for the badge. Unfortunately, it is players like, I'm going to use them, Casemiro, Modric, Tony Kroos, players that have a massive quality about them, but also a great deal of experience because they've been there, they've done it, they've been in them situations. Who do we bring in that fits everything that we want to create, but also gives us that quality? Because there's got to be a sense of top 4's important now, not in 5 years.
Yeah, go on, Ben. I'll let you answer that.
I think it's just been a bit more smart with the transfers. Like, there's been quite a few rumours this week, like Nuno Mendes, Dani Olmo's having a bit of an issue at Barcelona. To me, they are very high quality players, but they also make sense. You think of when we signed Casemiro, it was because we couldn't get De Jong, but Casemiro and De Jong are complete opposite.
Very different. Yeah.
So they went out and panic bought. The Antony signing, we'd apparently valued him at 25 million. We went out and paid 80 because we panicked. It's just been a bit more sensible. And I think the fans are smart enough to understand that. If we go out and we go to PSG and we say, right, we want Nuno Mendes, and they turn around and say, well, we want 60 million for him, we can't afford to pay 60 million for a left back unless we get rid of Luke Shaw and Malacia. So ultimately, we can see that as fans. So it's just kind of piecing all that together and picking players that suit the system. Dani Olmo, I think, suits the system. Cunha from Wolves, he suits the system. Go and pay for players that fit into what you're trying to do rather than just bringing in big name players, which we've seen countless times, haven't we? Di Maria, Casemiro, Sanchez, the list is endless. And I think quality wise as well, I either look back on some of United squads that have finished in the top 4. You think of when we had Lukaku, although he was frustrating, he was guaranteed to score. What did he score in his first season? 26, something like that.
Yeah.
Across. We don't have that now. So ultimately, you've got to go out, and striker is the one position as well. You have to pay big sometimes, and you have to go and get quality. We should have got a Harry Kane. We should have got Tony. We should have got Isak. We should have got whoever. Ultimately, now we're stuck with 2 players that have never scored over 10 goals in the Premier League.
Yeah, I agree with what Ben's saying. I don't think at this stage, I don't think we need big sort of flashy players. We don't need to worry about how many shirts we're going to sell, like a sort of Ronaldo coming back, a Pogba deal or whatever. We need a team of just players that are right, players that want to come and just dig in. I've seen a lot of stories about Liam Delap at Ipswich. I think he looks a very, very good player. There's a lad at Bournemouth I quite like, Semenyo, I think his name is, plays on the right-hand side, another good player. The obvious striker is Gyökeres. Whether we'll get him for decent money, I don't know. But I think if we have years where we're intelligent in the market, but not necessarily sign these big name players, then we'll get better, and we will get to the point where the big name players are going to want to come back to us. Do you know what I mean?
So obviously, I know we're short for time, but really quick then, I've got 6 players that are free agents in the summer that we could potentially sign on a pre-contract in January. Would you bring any of them in, knowing that you're going to get them for free, but you might have to pay north of 300k for them? Jonathan David, Paul Pogba, Alphonso Davies, Joshua Kimmich, Leroy Sane, and Min Sun from Spurs.
Ben?
It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all 3, and I think from what I can gather, well, I don't know where Paul Pogba's position on United would stand, but I think all three of these are looking to move. All 5 of them are looking to move clubs, in my opinion.
I think I've already spoke about the Davies one. I think that makes sense because it fits the system. I think David would bring us a level of quality and goal scoring that we don't really have. The other ones, to be honest, I'm not. It feels like the wrong direction to take. Paul Pogba, I love Paul Pogba as a football player, but I don't think it's right to do that. Kimmich, I think, is a brilliant football player. If you could go and get Kimmich on 150 grand a week, I'd be all over that. But it's not going to be that. Son is one that you probably say could be a good deal. If you could go to Son and say, right, we'll give you the contract, but it's only a 2-year contract. You're coming in to play because he probably suits that in behind the striker situation.
Yeah.
But like you said, that's the market we should be looking in. And I think as well, players below us are in the teams perceived to be below us, like Brighton, Bournemouth. You could go to Fulham and say, right, Robinson at left back, he dramatically improves our team. Like you say, from Bournemouth, Semenyo, Kirkes, they improve our team. Obviously, you're going to have to go and pay for them. But all of these teams below us or just above us improve our team. So go and do that. That's what United used to do, is go and sign from the Premier League.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know my thoughts on Pogba. I'd go nowhere near Pogba now. I don't think he's right. I think Nuno Mendes is probably the direction we're going to go down, as opposed to Alphonso Davies. I think we'll probably go down that direction because I think it probably will be cheaper. The wages will probably be cheaper, and it'll be free as well. So the one that I'd probably want to do, but I'd have wanted to do it sort of 5 years ago, would be Son. I thought sort of 5 years ago, I thought he was an amazing player. I think he feels like he's on a little bit of a decline for me. But like Ben says, if you can get him on good money, a contract that he's happy with, I'd have him 100%. Kimmich, I think he'll go City. Kimmich,
Son as well, isn't there? Because I think his hero's Partey's son. So I think there's some sort of passion for United in there. So I know he's become a Spurs player and a Spurs legend, but I think deep down there'd potentially be a desire for him to follow in his hero's footsteps and come to United. I think he's Premier League proven, and if we're losing Marcus Rashford, does he improve the squad, not necessarily the 11? And I think he does. I think he's got a really good attitude as a football player as well, hasn't he? I think that, and I think that sometimes is what you want over your quality. You know, I'd take Son over Pogba, for example, just because I know some wouldn't add to a toxic dressing room, whereas Pogba, if things didn't go his way, potentially would. Does that make sense?
Well, when you had Harry Kane at Spurs, Son was as pivotal to Harry Kane scoring X amount of goals as Harry Kane was. But Son wasn't the one getting headlines.
Say he's on a decline as well. Maybe he's just missing Harry Kane. You know, maybe he's just not because they played so well for so long together.
Yeah.
Maybe Son just needs another.
If we can get him, I mean, I'd 100% take him, and I'd be over the moon if we got him.
What's his wages on? Do we know?
What's that? Say again.
What's his wages on? Does anyone know?
I can't imagine it'd be that much.
No.
It's Daniel Levy, isn't it? I can't imagine it'd be a huge amount. I think he'll probably be one of their top earners, but I don't know, 150, 100 and what?
190.
Okay. So that's not too bad. If you think as well, if we get rid of Casemiro, that's a Son and a Mendes or something. Do you know what I mean?
No, Mendes is
on. You replace him with Marcus Rashford and save 150 grand a week.
Yeah.
Like Ben says, like Nuno Mendes is on 27 grand. If you put a contract with like 80 grand in front of him, he's going to be like, I'll have a bit of that. And he's played with Amorim before as well, at Sporting, if I'm correct in saying.
He brought him through, didn't he?
Yeah. But I think what you're saying there, though, Daz, I think it does massively highlight that there's a market out there that you can get into without spending sort of 400-500 million quid.
Yeah, I just think
players you can get.
It just adds that pure quality to the squad that I think we are lacking, especially when you're losing a player like Marcus Rashford that has that pure quality about him. I think we're gonna lose Casemiro in the summer that has that pure quality about him. Might not be getting that quality out of him, but they have that that quality in them.
Yeah.
And I think it does improve the squad, even if it's just training. And I think United need. I always think Alex Ferguson was successful because he had a really good balance of players that was past their prime, players coming into the prime, players that were just, in, say, the third, fourth year of their career, and then young players come up. He had a really good variety. And I think, like Ben said, he used to love going to our rivals and saying, Teddy Sheringham, we're taking you, Berbatov, we're taking you. He pinched the players from our rivals that improved our squad, because ultimately that doesn't just improve your squad, it lowers the quality of theirs. Which
I think what we need as well, Daz, I think a lot of our squad at the moment, I don't think they're there for the fight that we have now. I think they're players that we brought in a period like Bruno was brought in, and we were challenging for top 4. We were going for the big trophies. Rashford's been there for X amount of time. I think we need players to come in who are ready for the fight. Do you know what I mean? We're like a mid-table team that we need to fight to get the other way. And I think if we can sell that to enough players, I mean, you're still playing for Man United. You're still running out at Old Trafford every week. You're still playing for arguably one of the biggest clubs in the world. We just need the players with the right mindset, and then I think we'll be okay. It's just we're full of players now that have the wrong mindset. We've probably got 2 or 3 right now that are okay. The rest just aren't there mentally, I don't think. And in our league, I think you just get battered by very average teams. Like Wolves the other day. Wolves are okay, but for me, they're not a great team at all. And they ran us off the park the other day just because they had the desire to do it for a new manager that's been there a week. Do you know what I mean? And our players just don't have it. But yeah, good talking points, Daz. Good talking points. But I think we'll leave it there. And I think all that's left to say is, hope everyone has a good New Year. This will probably be the last show until after the New Year. I think we got the Scousers, haven't we, on Sunday. I can't remember. We got the Scousers at some point in the next week, so we'll be back with a game around that. Hopefully, if Daz is right, we're going to go to Liverpool and they're going to fall apart and we're going to get a win. So then, it'll all be good. But Daz, tell everyone where they can find you.
I am on TikTok pretty much. Normally, most days I'm live. That's Dave Controversial, and obviously I'm on here every week.
Lovely. Ben, where can we find you, buddy?
Yeah, same again over on TikTok. Most days trying to do a bit of different stuff. So yeah.
Lovely. It's taken off as well, his TikTok page. You get some good views. So if you don't follow Ben yet, go over and drop him a follow. And like I say, Happy New Year to everyone from all for United. And hopefully next year we'll be, I don't know, top half maybe. We might be in the lofty heights of top half. But yeah, take it easy, guys. We'll see you on the next one.